some of you remember them, some of you have heard them before, but these go chapter by chapter through 1 Corinthians, okay? And so I'm not going to explain them, I'm just going to remind you of them and ask you to say them with me because they're in the scriptures. So I'm going to say it, then you repeat after me. I lack no spiritual gift.
I lack no spiritual gift.
That's such a powerful thing. Chapter 2, I have the mind of Christ. I have the mind of Christ. Chapter 3, all things are mine. All things are mine. Chapter 4, this one's a little bit longer. I possess kingdom power. I don't have to boast in my own strength. I possess kingdom power. I don't have to boast in my own strength. Chapter 5, I didn't really give an affirmation, but if I was to boil it down to an affirmation, it comes like this. I can set appropriate boundaries in my life. I can set appropriate boundaries in my life. Chapter 6, that's where we are right now. And it's like this. I am not my own, I was bought with a price. I am not my own, I was bought with a price. Oh, chapter 7, there's a lot there, okay? I'm not even going to try to boil that down to one affirmation, but wow. The fact that God has given us the ability to have relationships that work. And he's given us instruction about how that works. Today, we're going to go to chapter 8. Chapter 8 is one of the shortest chapters in 1 Corinthians. And I want you to understand that as we go through this, what I shared with you last week, a little bit about that Gnostic teaching that was going around, and please forgive me, I don't want to turn this into a college level philosophy class because the boredom that ensues is just painful. But I want you to understand what was going on in the church at the time. The church was a brand new thing in the world. The story of Jesus was hitting every community that it came into just like an explosion. You've got to be kidding me. This guy was crucified and 3 days later he was alive? Oh yeah, sure. No, that's right. And there's evidence. 500 people saw him all together. I saw him. I talked to him on the road to Damascus. He changed my life. And the witness of that experience went across the world. And churches started up here and here and here and here. Paul went from place to place. And if we started naming the towns, we almost couldn't finish. But when you read through the books of the New Testament and you see the letters that Paul wrote, we realize he probably wrote letters. We have recorded letters to less than half of the churches that Paul started. It's incredible what happened. Now, in Corinth, something happened that was also happening in other churches along the way. There was a philosophy that had taken root in northern Africa, and it had spread across the world. There was this Greek culture that was happening down there, and they had all these Greekish ideas going. And then they heard the story of Jesus, and they said, what if we took this new story of Jesus and we wove it into our Greekish ideas, and we spread it, and all of the people who believe this nonsense about Jesus, I just said nonsense about Jesus. I hope that y'all understand I don't believe it's nonsense, okay? But they were thinking, if we could get people who believe this nonsense about Jesus into buying into the mashed up combination of theology and philosophy. Theology. That's us really important people say it that way. And they tried taking over this new movement because there was power in the movement. And those people were there in Corinth. Now, in the 7th chapter, we learned that the people, some of this Gnostic philosophy had several different manifestations of it. And honestly, they built an entire theophilosophical structure around this. And in the 7th chapter, we see the people who believe, and the Gnostics believed, spirit good, material stuff bad, flesh bad. There were a couple different camps about the way this worked. One of them said, if the spirit is good and the flesh is bad, then we must subject the flesh to the rules of the spirit and bring the flesh into submission. Therefore, they said, if you're a Christian and if you're a Christian man and you're married, you need to stop having intimate relations with your wife. That's when we know you're truly spiritual. We talked about that last week. All right? Now, we have just exactly the opposite thing happening in chapter 8. At the very beginning of chapter 8, the Gnostics are at it again. Only this time, it is the other camp of Gnostics that are, and they can't even get along with each other, get it? And so they're saying spirit is good, flesh is bad, so it really doesn't matter what the flesh does, just let your flesh go. And so they are saying, eat what you like. Now, I don't know about you, but in my Bible, the heading in my Bible says about food sacrificed to idols. Is that what you're saying? And so I'm thinking, I think we'll just skip this. Because how many of you have that issue? Is it a problem for you, eating food sacrificed to idols? Is that something we're wrestling with today? Not at all. So I'm wondering, is this really about food sacrificed to idols? Well, that was the presenting issue, but Paul identified what was really going on. Now, I want you to hear it, and I want you to see it in a little bit different way. Get my Bible turned around the right way. I want you to hear it and see it for what it is. He says, now, concerning food sacrificed to idols. And then there's this colon there. It's like, you got to understand that this letter was written in response to a series of letters. It looks like Paul has written at least one letter to the Corinthian church before this. He has received at least one letter from them. And I'm guessing that the last letter he received from them was full of questions and problems. And he's said, Chloe's family has shared with us that this is happening in the church. And so Chloe probably, they're reading this and they're looking at Chloe and said, really, girl? You had to rat us out like this? And so apparently there was a question asked about food sacrificed to idols. And I'm guessing it goes something like this. Is it proper for us to eat food that has been sacrificed to idols? And of course, I know that's the burning question you woke up with on your mind this morning. Paul answers. Now, concerning food sacrificed to idols. Big pause. I think if he'd been in present, he'd have been like, I can't believe we're talking about this. Okay, we know that all people have knowledge. When he used that word knowledge, he's pointing at the Gnostics. That word Gnostic means knowledge. Okay? They believed that they got themselves in this spiritual place. Ooh, I'm all spiritual. I'm all settled into my spiritual comfy couch. I got my spiritual Afghan wrapped around me. I've got my spiritual notebook right next to me. I've got my spiritual quill right next to me. I am writing spiritual stuff, and knowledge is descending on me from on high. And Paul slaps them in the face. Nothing short of knock it off. He says, we know that we all have knowledge. Big hairy deal. That might not be in the text exactly that way. Take a look at what it says. If anyone imagines that he knows something, he does not yet know as he ought to know. And this brings us back to something we've talked about before. There is a place for humility in our lives. Sometimes we begin to think, God has revealed to me. Maybe you've heard of this happening. A cult leader saying, God has revealed to me that you should sell your house and bring the offering to me. God has revealed to me, and he goes up to a man. I hate to even say this, but this kind of thing happens. You really should give me your wife. He goes up to a woman. This happened down in Georgia in ostensibly a Christian church. If you want to be saved, you should sleep with me, the pastor says. God has revealed to me. If you think you have knowledge, you do not yet know the way you ought to know. And the people who are bringing this esoteric, this super spiritual knowledge are coming and they are destroying the church with their knowledge. So Paul says, you do not yet know the way you need to know. It's time for you to humble yourselves. He doesn't even use those words, but you're not as smart as you think you are. And he says, but the one who loves God, that person is known by God. What a beautiful, deft step off of the ridiculous train onto the truth train. Do you get me? Do you see what Paul did here? He took all of their arrogance and he just, in 2 lines, he just swept it away. And he said, how about we just focus on this? Let's love the God who saves us and rest ourselves in the knowledge that the God who saved me knows me. He didn't save us in general. He didn't just save the earth. He didn't just save mankind. He didn't just save the people of Israel. He didn't just save the people who decide they want to attend church. He saved me. He saved you. He knows your name. The one who loves God is known by God. What a beautiful thing that becomes for us. Now, there are 3 parts of this that remain in this chapter. And they go kind of like this. What is the truth? There are people who don't know the truth. And what will I do with the truth? Okay? What is the truth? Paul asked the question. I'm posing it as Paul asking the question. It's not really a question he asked. He addresses the issue of this concept of food sacrifice to idols. And as he goes through this, you see that he actually agrees with the Gnostics who say that, yeah, I can eat food sacrificed to idols. And their rationale was, after all, it's just food. The Spirit is the thing that matters. And this is just food, and so what's the problem? Now, a little quick history here. Once food had been brought to the temple and sacrificed to an idol, it is believed that that food was sold more cheaply in the marketplace than other food that was brought directly to the marketplace for sale. And so people could pick that up and, get a little break. It's like shopping at Aldi's. Okay? You get to go over to the temple, buy the cheap stuff, and hey, maybe there's a little extra benefit. Because after all, it was dedicated to an idol. And in the worldly culture, that was the thinking. I save a little coin and I get a little benefit, a little spiritual benefit. It's like having a blessed item on my plate. And I don't dig blessed items. I don't invest in that. I don't believe in that. I don't encourage people to put their trust in that. If you're going to sell your house, I don't care if you bury a statue of St. Joseph upside down in your backyard. It's not going to help. If you're going to travel, it doesn't matter if you've got a little St. Christopher thing on your chest. It's not going to help. Those things are empty. And what Paul's approach here is, as you read through these next few verses, Paul's approach is a purely logical approach, not spiritual. Don't get me wrong, Paul is deeply spiritual, but his argument isn't spiritual. It's like when I was in high school, we did a thing in geometry. Do you remember geometry? And you're doing the proofs, and you're having to this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and you had to identify the reason for every step in your process. And if I came to one that was too hard, I just wrote IOTTMCO. It's intuitively obvious to the most casual observer. And that was the thing that Paul does. He takes them to the intuitively obvious. I want you to read with me. Therefore, as to the eating of food offered to idols, we know that an idol has no real existence. Now, what Paul is arguing here is a purely secular, logical argument. He actually says something different 2 chapters later. It's just an idol. It's just a piece of stone. It's just a piece of metal. He says, we know that an idol has no real existence. And it appears that he may be actually quoting the Gnostic idea. And that there is no God but one. For although there may be so-called gods in heaven or even on earth, and indeed there are many gods and many lords, and people have said, over here I want to worship this God, and over here I want to worship this God, and over here I want to worship this God. He said, yeah, they're all over the place. He's just looking at the world through the observation of someone who understands secular logic. Okay? What he's going, he says, but yet for us there is one God, the Father, from whom are all things, and for whom we exist, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, and through whom we exist. What he does here is he says, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so he says to the Gnostics who are there, the people who are causing trouble, the people who are trying to take over, and these kinds of false teachers are everywhere. He says, you win. You win. You can have it your way. And then he turns it another place. The fact is that there are things that the church can do that will be very similar to, and maybe even right alongside, what the world is doing, And the question isn't so much, is it wrong to do or right to do? The question is, why are we doing it? And Paul says, okay, you win. If you want to eat that food, go buy that food. But let me give you a little something to think about. Just a little something to think about before you do. Talk. And so down here in verse 7, however, not everyone, not all, possess this knowledge. We all have knowledge. And he's actually, when he said that earlier, remember, we all have knowledge. He is saying to those who think they really have a special knowledge, it's not that special. But there are people who have different kinds of knowledge. I look around this room and I see vast areas of difference in experience, in training, in education, in capacity, in skill. And if I was to compare myself with some of those people in some of the areas where they are skilled, I don't measure up. And Paul says, there are some who don't understand this very simple truth we've gone through. That these idols are essentially meaningless. There are some who don't get it. They don't possess this knowledge. And what is it? But some, through former association with idols, eat food as really offered to an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. Food will not commend us to God. We are no worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do, but take care. I'm going to stop right there. We live in a world where people have had their minds hardwired to think a certain way, to do a certain thing. There are some, when they hear the national anthem in our country, they stand up. Some will go so far as put their hand over their heart. And then there are some who will do something altogether different. They don't even recognize the tune. They keep talking. They crack open another cold one. That it doesn't have any meaning to them. There are some who look at it as an opportunity to make a political statement. And it all comes out of the culture in which they have lived. That culture works on us. That culture shapes us. It shapes the way we think. It shapes the way we understand. It shapes the way we perceive reality. And Paul looks at these people in the church who are doing this with the food offered to idols. And again, it's not our issue, but we will get to some issues. And he says, there are people here who are hurt by what you are doing. You see, they were raised as servants of those idols. So they were raised going to those temples. They were raised seeing those people, those things worshipped. And so when they see food being brought from that idol, or maybe you're actually eating in the courtyard of the temple, and they think you are worshiping Jesus and worshiping this idol? And they're confused. And they realize this isn't as clear cut as can I have a little of this and a little of that? And I think the thing we got to get is we don't get to have a little bit of Jesus and a little bit of idols any more than we get to have a little bit of this wife and a little bit of that wife. No, it doesn't work that way. I have to understand that my actions impact people around me, and some of them have weaknesses that are not mine. So, if I become all foul-mouthed because I think, really, I don't mean anything by it, and it's not a big deal, and the whole world is doing it anyway, and all of a sudden, somebody over here hears me just turning the air blue, and suddenly they think, well, if Pastor talks like a sailor, why can't I? And along with all of that kind of conversation comes an entire way of thinking, a way of thinking about power, about corruption, about money, about gender, about sex, about all kinds of issues that are all associated with what comes out of our mouths. And so Paul says, we're going to ask what's true. We're going to recognize that there are some people in the world who don't understand what's true. And then we're going to ask ourselves, what difference does it make in the way that I act? Now take a look here down in verse 9. But take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. This is the central verse of the Bible. If I had an affirmation that I was going to put in here, it would be this. As a child of God, I have rights. Cool. But there's more. Also, as a child of God, I have the ability to limit and restrict those rights for the sake of the person beside me. My mother had a thing she would say when people came over to the house to visit. They commonly did this on a Sunday morning. We would be up, we would go to church, and we would be meeting people and back and forth. And this may shock you to learn this, but my family was always the last to leave the church because, well, we talk. Maybe that's a surprise. It might not be. But in those conversations, my dad would frequently say, why don't you come over to the house for lunch? And my mom has put in lunch for a family, a mom and dad and 4 kids, and now we have 6 people coming over. And so Mom, we would be sitting down to the table and Mom would just say FHB. And we didn't know what that, nobody knew what that was, but the family knew what that was, and that was family hold back. Do you hear what I'm saying? It was our house. The food was prepared for us. It was our right. It was our privilege. It was ours. And we had also the right, so that the people who were the guests in our home could feel welcome. We had the right to take a smaller piece of that amazing roast beef. I don't want very much pie. I just want a little tiny, Mom, I'm not very hungry. We have rights as children of God. We have freedoms as children of God. We are under no condemnation as children of God. We are free as children of God. And yet, in our freedom, we can say, I'm going to restrict my access. I'm going to restrict and limit my appetites so that the people around me can experience what it means to be children of God. Now, you have the right, let me just say it this way, you have the right to post any nonsense thing you want on social media. But it wouldn't necessarily be helpful, right? You have the right, if someone has injured you and offended you, you have the right to shake your fist at them. You have the right to send them a squinchy face. I don't need grouchy face, that face, on with the emoji, or to make that face in person. You have the right. But do you need to use that right? We have First and Second Amendment rights as citizens of this great nation. But just because you have the right to speech doesn't mean you always have to speak. And that you have to say every last thing that comes into your head. You have a Second Amendment right. You have the right to carry a weapon, the right to bear arms. But just because you have the right to bear arms doesn't mean that you want to take it everywhere and use it anywhere and be indiscriminate with the way that that's managed. Having a right doesn't mean you have and must. So here we are. He's asking us to limit our rights. Now, if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple. So you've gone in, you got the cheap food, and then you just brought it out to the courtyard and they have the little cafe thing and the temple prostitutes are coming out and pouring your coffee and whatever. And if you think that that's just facetious, that's the kind of thing that took place in those ancient pagan temples. And so, will he not be encouraged if his conscience is weak to eat food offered to idols, and in his weakened conscience to imagine that has power? And so by your knowledge, this weak person is destroyed in the brother for whom Christ died. Thus, sinning against your brother and wounding their conscience when it is weak, you will sin against Christ. Paul says, therefore, if my brother is offended, if my brother is weakened, if my brother is led astray by me eating meat, I will never eat meat again. This is the beautiful part. God doesn't put the law down on us. He gives us the ability to choose what is right for ourselves. Now, that's a difficult thing for us. My daughters knew they were in trouble anytime they came to us and they asked us, Mom, can we do this? Or would that be all right to do this? And Tina said, honey, I know you'll do the right thing. And today, if they tell you about those moments, they say, and Mom said, I know you'll do the right thing. Here's the thing. Ultimately, that's the nature of freedom. God is wanting people who walk with him by choice, not who walk with him by edict. When you walk with God, do you walk with God grumpy, saying, oh, if I walk with God, I can't have any fun? Or do you walk with God saying, we're gonna enjoy this trip even if I don't have everything exactly the way I would have picked it. I will walk with God. And in walking with God, I'm going to make it possible for a brother to come alongside me. I'm going to make it possible for a sister to come alongside me. I'm going to make it possible so that we can walk this side by side, encouraging and uplifting one another. I don't have to have my way. Ultimately, I think a better heading for this chapter, let's replace regarding food sacrificed to idols, even though that was Paul's phrase. How about regarding always getting your way? Because that's not the pathway to freedom. That's not the pathway to joy. That's not the pathway to righteousness. That's not the pathway to making disciples. That is the pathway to self-destruction. And Paul has said, you are not your own. You were bought with a price. I want to encourage you today to recognize the wonder of the freedom that God has given you when he called you to be his child. You are precious to me, child. You are dear to me. You have so much power. You have so much more authority than you ever thought. You have so much more freedom than you could ever imagine. Use that authority. Use that power. Use that freedom to bring life, not to just indulge yourself. And that's the beauty of what Paul writes when dealing with some of these teachers who are just tearing the church apart. You and I, maybe food sacrifice to idols isn't our issue. But I'm guessing walking humbly with the Lord and with those around us for their benefit is an issue you deal with every day. May God guide you. May you listen as you go through this life with him. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for giving us your word, your teaching. Thank you for revealing not just who you are, but in that process revealing who we are, your children, set free, empowered, given the mind of Christ, laid out with so much abundance. Father, you are the one who has given us our lives. May we no longer seek to have our meaning through the ways in which we indulge ourselves. Set us free from personal indulgence, personal appetites, personal desires, and empower us forward with love for you and love for one another. Pray this in Christ's name.